Hello, and welcome to Digital Decode with Qhala. My name is Laura Walubengo, and I am your host for this podcast, where we'll be diving into anything that has to do with technology in Africa. And the aim of this podcast is for us to be able to decode anything that's happening digitally on the continent. As you know, the future of this continent is steeped in technology, and so you better be listening. What we're trying to do here is make sure that you're enlightened and inspired. Hello. My name is Laura Walubengo. I'm your host. Welcome to another episode of Digital Decode. Today we have a very special guest. His name is Dr. Fred Mutisya. Now, while we were still playing around with ChatGPT, this guy had already created his own AI model. I don't know what they're called. Yeah, his own AI model. And so he has a very interesting story to tell about the genesis of that, but I'll let him speak for himself. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
Please introduce yourself.
Yeah. So my name is Fred Mutisya. I'm a medical doctor based here in Kenya. Been practicing for about 12 years now. Half of that has been digital health. And also I double up as the health tech lead at Qhala. And I volunteer at the Kenya Medical Association and the Kenya Health Informatics Association as the AI lead. Yeah.
That's very interesting. So for the 12 years you've been practicing, a chunk of that is with digital health. What does that mean?
So basically in health, there are two facets. There's the clinical and non-clinical. So clinical means your day-to-day is seeing patients. You go for your ward rounds, you do your surgeries, etc. You deliver babies, definitely. Then there's the non-clinical side, which now is more of the back office, where you're talking about data, you're talking about health systems, you're talking about record systems, basically everything quality that helps to support the clinical. So half of that time, I got into management. And in management, you deal with claims data from insurance. So you have to have good analysis. You deal with research data. And from that, you realize that there's a whole world beyond just seeing patients. And that's the whole other world of non-clinical medicine.
So when you studied to be a doctor, did you see it going that way? Or what was the plan?
Yeah, because our training is like for 6 years. But when you look at the divide, was 90% clinical work. So we used to do how to deliver a baby, how to treat a baby. Then there was this unit called community health, which they lumped everything that was non-clinical, like health systems, how to work with data. So when you get out of medical school, you'll never feel, I have been equipped to deal with data, to deal with AI, to deal with technology. Right now, medical schools are doing inculcated degrees. So you do medicine with IT or medicine with MBA.
Okay.
But it's a whole different thing from when we did medical school.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things I'd wanted to ask you is whether you still practice. So if you're practicing digital health, I guess you're still practicing. So in as a doctor, I know you're the health tech lead, so that's a totally different thing.
Yes.
But as a doctor, in your day-to-day, what does your work look like?
Yes. So first of all, I'm still practicing. I still have an active license. So and I think that's one of the things that I intentionally said I have to keep. I think my first role is a doctor, and that is the biggest asset that I have. So my day-to-day, basically, I have the tech work that I do, but I also volunteer in the HIV program. So where we see children who have HIV and we give technical advice. So I've been doing a bit of that. In Narok County, my day-to-day was I wake up, then I go and see patients in the ward, then see a bit of clinic patients, discharge them. And now the funny thing is, by noon or by 2, you're more or less done and you're just waiting for patients to come in. And during these lulls in the space is when I did a bit of tech stuff.
A bit of tech stuff. Okay. Yeah. So, how did you get to Narok in the first place? Just take me through your journey.
Okay. So I graduated in 2013. And the way the Kenyan system works, when you graduate, you can't just go to the market. You have to do internship. Did internship for 1 year at PCA Kikuyu. That's the Goto Hospital. Then after that, during that time, we didn't have interviews. So what used to happen is the government would see a service need and you are transitioned straight from internship to the field. So actually, have I ever done an interview before? No, I haven't done an interview. Because at that time, you just said,
so
okay,
lucky.
you used to go to off your house and you're given a list. And the list said, oh, you'll go to Narok, which was good because it means that the underserved places where people ordinarily wouldn't want to work would get still the quality healthcare resource that they deserve. So we are posted to Narok, and from Narok I was sent straight to a place called Kilgoris. Then started working there from 2015 until 2018. Then now transitioned into management. So that's when you're moving from a medical officer, you're given the additional roles in terms of hospital management. And I've been doing that until when I went back to school to do my master's, and now study leave for the past 2 years.
Okay.
So that has been the journey. Yeah.
So when did the AI take over? So for most of us, I imagine it became such a big thing because of ChatGPT.
Yes.
But then you were probably dabbling in this tech long before that.
Yeah.
So tell me, what was your genesis with working with AI, and what did that look like?
Yeah. So the funny thing about working in a rural community is if you're in Nairobi and it's a weekend, you'll have places to go. But I was inside next to the Mara, and you don't have, like, Saturday comes, you don't want to travel to Nairobi every single Saturday. So you find some weekends you're just alone in the house. You've done your duty, you come back to the house. So I started thinking, okay, what interests me? Tech has always interested me. And now I went to the next level, which is now doing a bit of research, then discovered R, which is a programming language for statistics. Did a bit of R, went into Python. It was almost like a discovery. Then you hear, oh, you can make websites. Then you're like, oh, HTML, CSS. You try that. So it was more of trial and error, mainly a lot because I didn't have anything else to do. And when you're presented with the resource and you have a laptop and you have all these courses online, and also it was interesting because you'd realize that even if you don't have like the fancy equipment in Nairobi Hospital, which would make you a better doctor, with technology, you can be a better programmer with just your laptop. And I found that very intriguing because what that did, it switched on something that was almost like you just discovered this whole world, because it was almost like you're given a key and told you do your stuff. So got into Python. And as you know, Python is the language of AI. So as I was doing the courses, then I discovered, machine learning. And so with machine learning, we are a group of guys who are doing courses in R and Python. And that's where the first AI challenge came in. So what that means is you're given datasets and you're told you do your thing. So at that time, I thought to myself, okay, I've been dabbling on all these things, but I've never made something that is actually real. So I was like, this is opportunity. We were given datasets on antibiotics. And I think that was the first thing that switched on the whole, let me make things based on AI with the data that I have.
So who gave you these datasets?
So this dataset was from Pfizer. So there was this challenge that was sponsored by Wellcome Trust and a company called Vivli. So what Vivli does, they go to the big pharma and say, okay, you've used your data, and once you've launched your product, your data is technically not of commercial use to you. Why don't you de-identify it and put it out there for use for the common good? So the challenge was you have antibiotic information from like 16 years. It was close to 1 million data points, very rich data. And they said, okay, here it's just merit. We don't care whether you're a professor, whether you're a student, you just make something. And for me, I thought, okay, I've been doing all this machine learning. My initial thought was just to do all the normal analysis, graphs. But I thought, okay, I've done machine learning. I've done a bit of web development. So why don't I combine something? Because I noticed the one thing that was missing from a lot of medical research is the last mile. Somebody does very many good things. They stay on paper. We have done this. We've projected this. We've made this model.
Then it ends there.
They haven't built something that can be used by the users. So, and I think that's what made me win that first challenge, because that extra thing that people were able to interact with that tool, live, as Kenyans say, I think that was the thing that really made that initial innovation click. Yeah.
Okay. So tell me about this AI, the program, and when you say last mile, how exactly does somebody use it?
Yes. So people talk about, oh, we've done this, we've seen this, predicts this, and they have nice graphs. But the truth of it is when somebody actually uses it and tests it and sees for themselves. So one of the principles, especially when you're talking about front-end development, is giving the user experience, user interface, UX, UI, basically. And now those principles is what I took now. Yes, I knew all these things of analysis, all this of machine learning, but now taking it now to be something that somebody can use. So made a web application, which somebody was able to interact with. They press this, something works. And I think that was the power of now translating science into actual things that people can use. And that's the whole point of product discovery and product creation. So what essentially I did is took the data, took all those predictors of this drug works in females, it doesn't work too well in males, and all that information, distilled it into a machine learning platform, but now was able to put it out there so that anyone, anywhere can be able to try it out. And even if they have their own data and saying, I have my own data, does this antibiotic work for females under 25 or people who live in Kibera or live in Scandinavia? You can put in that data and you can try it out and even build something of your own. So that was the whole gist behind it.
So who uses it?
So part of the data challenge was once you build it, you're given the option. You can either put it in your pocket and hide it for commercial use, or you can open source it. And I think initially I didn't have a concept of open source. Like, what's open source? We've been so used to hiding things. But so they gave you a small token, like a prize money, but the prize money was conditional on putting it out there. You put your code, basically you put all your trade secrets out there. And I took that route. Why? Because already I saw, okay, there is that thing of adoption, which especially when you're talking about Africa and Kenya, if you're going to put a price tag on your product, your adoption rate will be quite small. And you'll have to, you have to put some money towards client acquisition. And sometimes it's your focus moves away from doing what you do. Now you become somebody in marketing and whatever. And I was interested in that. So I went for the option of making it open source. And what that meant, my code was put on GitHub. I published it on Welcome Open Research. And now it was there for everyone. And guess what? Somebody from Kisii reached out to me and was like, I saw your conference presentation in Barcelona because we did our conference presentation in Barcelona. And I've tried it on my data. And I think that was the impact. Like if I had gone the avenue of commercializing it and trying to reach now people individually, I wouldn't have gotten to that level. And I think that's the power of open sourcing. And that's now to answer your question in terms of usage, it can be used by anyone.
Can be used by anyone.
Without any gatekeeping. So it's a purely open sourced tool.
Okay, I think you've given one example on let's say an antibiotic that works better on females rather than males. But speaking to somebody who I the only thing I know about doctors when I'm told go for an X-ray, go for an MRI. So if you were to speak really plainly, how exactly, maybe you can say the name of the AI and how exactly you envision it's going to make a difference.
Yes. So it's called antimicro.ai. And basically, the question that anyone would ask is, when I have an infection, whether it's of the lungs or wherever, the question is, you're given an antibiotic to fight whatever that is. And we have different categories. You have bacteria, you can have a fungi, you can have a parasite, but not everything works for everyone. And not everything works for the different types of bacteria. And when you go to hospital, there are a number of criteria that people use to determine, will this work for you? So sometimes they look at your age, sometimes they look at how sick you are. They'll give you something that you can swallow versus something that is injectable. But you'll find that most of the time, it's the truest test of what to use is actually testing the bacteria. So if you have a chest infection, we take a sample of your sputum, take it to the lab, test it, then against different antibiotics, and we see, okay, which one does it work best on? So that is what is called antimicrobial susceptibility testing. And that's the data that Pfizer gave me.
Okay.
So, but it's very expensive and it can't be done for everyone. So my solution was, okay, let's use what has been discovered in the lab and now try to make predictors based on where people live, how old they are, what is their gender, what antibiotics have they used before, and how sick they are. So now based on that, now you can input all those things into just a simple drop-down menu and get a result of saying amoxicillin will not work for this person, so choose something else. Or the flip side would be, you don't need to do a very expensive antibiotic. You don't need to go amoxiclav, which people like. So you can do a simple one. And also it helps reduce the cost of care, because a lot of the times you have over-treatment on one end where people are given very strong antibiotics, which a simple antibiotic will still work. So there's that, it solves the two aspects of over-treating and under-treating. So under-treating means you stay for 2 or 3 days with an antibiotic which doesn't work, you get sicker and sicker, and your outcomes are worse. So under-treatment. Or over-treatment means that you give a very strong antibiotic, which it results in higher cost of care for you. And technically you would have worked with something that's less than $2. So that's the whole dynamic.
That's so interesting. So the fact that it's open source, are you able to see how many people actually interact with it?
So the way I structured it and the way GitHub is, somebody can just take it. Yes, there are some statistics which are on GitHub, but the GitHub doesn't really track unless it's forking, but anyone can come and copy it. And I think that's the joy of open source. You put it out in the world, and after that, you just let it have its own. Because I feel like also there's that thing of trying to have ownership on something that has gotten a life of its own. So when like in the open source world, because it was a code that could be copied by somebody, really don't care whether they copy it 100 times or 1,000 times. But the funny thing is, been gotten testimonials from people who are using it, and they're trying to say, okay, now I'm stuck. This come and help me to do something with it. And actually, I was able to pivot that to my first remote job with Antibiotic, because when I was in Barcelona presenting the solution, the CEO of that company came and approached me and said, "We're trying to do what you're doing here. Can you come and assist us?" And from that platform, like right now, we are in Canada, France, and Germany.
Nice.
And I'm seeing the impact there, hoping to see the same impact in Kenya and in Africa. Yeah.
I guess, being able to Google things and search for things on the internet makes you feel like a doctor when you're sitting at home. Like, I don't want to go see a doctor, but maybe I know I need an antibiotic to clear this infection.
Yes.
And we say it very loosely, actually. Maybe we don't understand the harm that it can do to our bodies. But would you recommend, let's say, somebody like me at home? I've gone for the treatment. I mean, for tests.
Yes.
And then you get your test results, which usually don't make any sense to the layman. And then I feed that information into your app. And then compare it to what I've been given by the doctor. Is that something you'd recommend for someone to do, or?
Yeah. That's the funny thing about patient autonomy. So
patient what?
Autonomy, meaning you give the client enough information to make that decision. However, there's that point where you don't want to circumvent the guardrails which are there in health. So definitely, as a second opinion, definitely work. But even when you look at how we've launched the solution in France, because Europe has very strict GDPR rules, meaning the protection rules in terms of health are very strong. Number one, you can't be marketed to the client. So this is a tool primarily for doctors.
Okay.
And it's for doctors to help fine-tune their solutions. And at the end of the day, to help the doctor who is overseeing other doctors to help them make a better decision. A decision which is not commercial-based, so that somebody dying...
Just based on data.
Which is based on data, basically. So though there is this other aspect, and when you're talking about a lot of health AI models, there's this whole client-facing which regulators are still grappling with, because you still want to empower the client, but you don't want for them to just go wild and now go to the pharmacy and self-treat and self-medicate. So there's that balancing act. And what has been in Europe means you restrict it to be just a client-facing tool. But in Kenya, a lot of people are able to get a prescription of an antibiotic without it being written. You just go and ask for it, which is different from Europe. Because even in Europe, even if you wanted to, you can't go and get an antibiotic just by asking. You have to have a prescription. So I think those are the dynamics in healthcare which make it not a one-size-fits-all for all the demographics that you work in.
Okay. So if you look at antimicro.ai and what it has opened up in your life in terms of work, what about your mind? What did it show you once you had this done? You're like, okay, it's done.
Yeah.
Your Saturdays have been spent. What did it make you think of next?
Yes. So the thing that I thought next is, like, what will I make next? You know, the funny thing is somebody's told me, like, with your first innovation, don't fall in love with it. And I'm glad I even open sourced it, because you open source, you leave it and it just develops a life of its own. So you're not following up on it. You're not tweaking it. And it's good because health is so broad. And sometimes, like, from that first dive into innovation, I was able to get a very nice job with a great CEO called Dr. Matthew. And it's remote, working with great innovators from Canada and France. And we're just building solutions. And it's just building with the same mind of how do we make things better for clients? How do we make them live longer, live more productive lives? And on the flip side is, from that one, so we published a paper, got a bit of buzz. And from that, I was able to leverage now Kenya. You know, Kenya, people ask, what have you done? So it was a good stepping stone and a platform. And now what I did, also the other thing about open source, so I didn't leave it like an orphan innovation. So last year, we improved on it. We did the same challenge and we won the Impact Prize. So what we did, we improved on antimicro.ai by incorporating decision support. So in addition to just telling you this antibiotic will work and this one will not, we went ahead and said, okay, can we incorporate the wealth of information that is out there? Because right now, doctors are drowning in information. Let's take information from research, PubMed. Let's take information from the different guidelines, clinical practice guidelines, distill it so that when now, instead of, because the feedback we got from doctors is that they didn't want just to be told, use this, don't use this. They wanted to be told why. And that was the second iteration. Again, we open sourced it. And basically we said, okay, can we use large language models to take all this information to help doctors understand the why? Why should you use this? Not just use this or don't use this. And basically we say, okay, this drug has worked in Peru in a study in a similar population. Maybe it can work in your population. Or this, there is this study which showed that there was this side effect for this antibiotic. So you better give your patient proper advice and tell them to watch out for a rash that might come, because 20% of the patients had this rash. So that was the why aspect which we improved on it. And we are thankful that we were able to improve on it. And again, we open sourced it. And that's the whole ethos was also open sourced. You don't leave it as an orphan. You also maintain it and improve on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's actually like it's just continuing. There's more things. Okay, so when it comes to data, and there's a lot of data that you said you got from Pfizer.
Yeah.
But now here in Kenya, we are known, or actually I know now that we're very good with our data. So we have all this data that we've collected. Maybe, I don't know where it lives.
Yes.
But if you speak from a Kenyan perspective and the data that you've been able to play with, what are some of the trends that maybe you've picked on that are quite interesting that you feel you might want to apply some technology to?
Yeah. That's an interesting point. Because also the funny thing is, from that initial work we did with the Pfizer data, I was able to get an opportunity to work with the Kenyan antibiotics data to do the analysis as part of my master's program. And you're writing a paper on that. I think the problem with, or rather, maybe not, let me not say the problem, let me not be negative. The challenge or the opportunities that exist with Kenyan data, it's very rich, but it's siloed and it's still in largely not digital formats. So unlike the West, where you go through a whole cycle of digitizing data, then using it, sometimes in Kenya, we have to skip that step. So we have to skip the digitization step and go straight from voice to models. So you'll not go and get 10 years worth of records in a hospital X. So even as you're thinking about your solution, you wouldn't want to start thinking of how do I build this architecture to collect 10 years worth of data? Because also that's an investment that has been, it's a bit outdated because now you have to think about how do I bypass all those obstacles and those bottlenecks and make models which plug in directly to the source of the data, which sometimes is in voice. So Kenya is currently doing what is called a digital superhighway. And what that means is the government is trying to aggregate all the health records into one platform. And that will enable, for number one, to be visibility of data. So you'll know where the data is. And number two, to allow for interoperability so that if you move from Isiolo and you relocate to Marsabit, you don't need to carry your paper-based files because files remain with the hospitals. But your data is portable and all you need is a one-time password where you're able to give your password and now the hospital, whether it's private or public, is able to access your data for a limited period of time to enable your care. So that is one of the places where I'm excited to see where Kenya will go with its data because that will open a whole world of possibilities.
Do you know how long that's been trying to do that? Because I've heard of that superhighway.
Yeah.
But I mean, in your estimation, how long do you think it's going to take before we actually start using it?
Okay. I think the plans were there for the past 5 years, like on paper. And right now already there are pilots going on. I really don't know at what extent there is. But when you look at the architecture has already been developed and the groundwork has already been done. So there's that point of adoption. Like moving from one system to another is a challenge. And government owns 43% of all facilities in Kenya, which are a lot. Like we have close to 15,000 facilities in Kenya. So upskilling all those healthcare workers is a tremendous task. And I think that's an opportunity for AI because you can't use the traditional slides and demonstration and you can't point and show this is how you use this MR.
Turnaround time, you want it to be faster.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So did any of this inform, I guess, the health roundtables that you're involved in? Because I know that you were involved in setting up and putting together some health AI roundtables.
Yes.
Maybe tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think that was Dr. Shiko through Dr. Beatrice approached me. So basically, the first time was doing the Kenyan AI strategy. And basically, we are trying to think, how do we inject the healthcare voice into the strategy? And that was, was my first interaction with the roundtable. And basically, the roundtable was, let's just get people who are like-minded into one room and let them talk, and let's see what we get from there. It's scripted, or obviously you have some talking points, but largely unscripted, because for this qualitative type of data, you really don't know what you expect from people. You want to give them opportunity to air their views. And that was really inspiring because from the paper that Qhala was able to develop around governance and data, it really speaks to what Kenya needs. And now from the roundtables, now Keith from Qhala has been doing an amazing job in organizing just a regular cadence of meetings where you get people and they talk about the different things from data, to ethics, to the issue of implementation, the challenges in terms of regulation. And when you look at the mix of people in the room, it's very hard to get somewhere else. So I think the last one we did was validating benchmarks. And the perspectives that we got were very rich, very rich. And it speaks to the power of community of practice in terms of shaping the narrative. Yeah.
Could you share some of those benchmarks, some of the, like, at least some of the consensus that came out of those?
Yeah. So just as a background, like when you talk about benchmarks for large language models, when people have claims that they make, they say, my model performs 20 times better than doctors. And or I have this solution that can do Laura's job 10 times better. But that's a claim. So you ask, okay, what metrics have you used? Quote unquote, what exam have you used? Because in most of the cases, you need an objective benchmark so that you can say, my model is better than humans or it's better than model A versus model B. So for the longest time, what people have been using is medical school exams. So you take the medical school exam, repurpose it, and you now bring it. But me and you know, like, what you learned in campus and the exams which you did are not representative of the realities of practice in the field. So we did look at these benchmarks, and what we notice is that the benchmarks don't speak to the reality of Africa. Why? Because you're talking about US entry-level exams, which are rightly so designed for Western medicine. So that when you go to the US and you think about somebody with a lung issue, you think sarcoidosis, not tuberculosis. Things which are very similar. But in Africa, we think tuberculosis first. It's almost like when you think hoof steps, they say when you think hoof steps, you think horses, not zebras. But in Africa, that might not be right. if you're working narrow, you're thinking zebras. So it was that whole aspect that made us rethink these benchmarks. Are they fit for purpose for the African continent? And just by an example, like you'd find HIV, which affects over 25 million Africans who are living productively. The thing about antiretroviral treatment has made people live as long as the normal individual. So we have people who are living longer with this condition which they're living productively with. And they need information. You'd expect a benchmark that is designed for health to have representative questions. So that to test, if I'm speaking to this 25 million, is it representative? And when you look at some benchmarks, have only 5 questions on HIV. And you ask, when you talk about everything from testing to treatment to side effects to psychosocial counseling to nutrition, there's a whole world. And first we thought 5 questions definitely cannot represent this. And that is true for other tropical diseases like dengue, leishmaniasis, which for us in our continent, as a doctor, I'm trained on that. I'm trained in Swahili. I'm trained to look for all those signs and symptoms in Swahili. But the benchmarks, number 1, they're in English. And number 2, they're focused on Western-centric diseases. So from that, we wrote a paper that was looking at this. We worked with the Kenyan Medical Association, and we were able to find out, these are the gaps. And from that, we're able to develop a methodology on what would be the ideal benchmark. And we called it Alama QA. And from Qhala's perspective is we're thinking, this is the model of an ideal benchmark. This is, if you're to test health in Africa, this is what it should look like. And we're hoping that this will catalyze a conversation to help people move away from the typical question and answers from medical schools. And we've been seeing a lot of that work with Health Bench. And we hope that now more and more people will move away from these exam-based benchmarks and now use truly representative benchmarks, so that when the next time you get a model that they say that it has health claims, they can say, okay, for some of these African diseases, this is how well it performs. Because we know Africa and health is not a monolith. Yeah.
So it's interesting that you managed to put all of this. I mean, I can just imagine the back thought with Alama QA.
Yeah.
But how can you bring that to life? I mean, fine, you've said you're hoping that it's going to catalyze a conversation, but what's the process of making that breathe, so to speak?
Yes. So the bridge is to look at what do actually healthcare workers use. And what they use is not medical school notes. They use what are called clinical practice guidelines. So for example, in Kenya, we have over 93 clinical practice guidelines. So when you go to your doctor's office, those are the books that they have there, or in soft copy. And sometimes they refer to
They're
them.
not for sure.
They're not for sure. And some of them are, you find things are stuck, like these are the vaccines that your child needs to get. So those are the practice guidelines. Like, for example, vaccines. No one just invents vaccines. In Kenya, we have 5 vaccines which are used, called pentavalent. In South Africa, there are 6 called hexavalent. And those small differences is what now we are saying should be the metric. And now for us, what we are doing, we saw that gap in HIV care. And now we are saying, okay, we got some healthcare workers and researchers. And now we are saying, okay, let's start by focusing on a big, high burden disease like HIV and make a benchmark and see how well do these benchmarks deal with HIV questions. Because we feel like we have a big population that needs that information, but they are largely underserved. So the process would start from taking all these clinical practice guidelines and putting them into one knowledge base, and now making question and answers from them. So basically, it's saying at 6 weeks, give your child this vaccine. We change that into a question. So from the clinical practice guidelines, if they're saying at 6 weeks, give this vaccine, vaccine A, we change it to what vaccine do you give it at 6 weeks? And hence we're able to ground the questions into the realities and the clinical practice guidelines. One other thing that we got from our doctors is they always also want to find out, yes, models know the right answer, but one of the feedbacks that we got from our pediatricians is, I want to find out if the model knows the right questions to ask. So for example, when you go to a hospital, it's a series of question and answer. And very rarely do you start and give a whole story and your doctor just gives you a prescription at the end. There's always that back and forth. And that's one of the things that one of our pediatricians asked. They were feeling uncomfortable with the immediate answer that LLMs gave. So they said, okay, can we have a way that we can be able to see at the back end, if I come with a child with a fever, does this model know the right questions? So we'll ask, have you traveled? Because in Kenya, we know if you travel to a malaria endemic area, malaria is high on the list. Have you traveled to a malaria endemic area? Does your child have a cough? Do they have this? Are they sleeping well? Are they eating well? Those are the questions that you would be asked in a clinical setting. But largely, we've skipped that in normal model training and evaluation. And we say, okay, we're only concerned whether you have got the right answer. And there's this thing called reward hacking in large language models, meaning that if I say the most common thing, most likely to be right. So if somebody asks, what did you take for breakfast today? I say tea. Maybe like for most people, because in this population, most people take tea. There's that guesstimation, which people use, and there's wow, this model knows me. But in essence, it's just guesstimating and seeing, okay, this person most likely have this. So that's now the higher level of evaluation that we are now talking about. And we are co-creating, and we hope once the HIV benchmark comes, it now can catalyze that people start thinking now differently.
And have better guesstimates.
Yes.
Okay, that's very interesting. So I know Alama QA and all the papers that you've been involved in, all the research work.
Yeah.
I feel like things are happening really fast.
Yes.
Is there a need for that speed?
Oh, that's the thing. Yes. Like that's the funny thing. It's almost like Tesla versus Edison. You would think you're the only person thinking about electricity, but people are thinking about it. And people are thinking like DC versus AC. Like you are thinking still about the same thing of power, let's make people's life better, but people have different approaches. And we've realized that, number one, you can't stay in your lab for 2 years and come with something. You have always to involve the community in co-creation, co-developing, and co-testing. Why? Because if you are to say, I'm going to develop this in secret, then now you come to the field, number one, you might realize that you are developing for the wrong population and for the wrong purpose. Then at the end, you might have to go back to the drawing board because things have moved. So with health and large language models and AI, the target is moving. So that means that even the creation process and the research process has to be dynamic, meaning that you can't just hide your methodology. In fact, methodology is part of the research. So you publish your methodology so that people can interrogate what you're planning to do. Will it work? Because you can't say, we'll just do this, then we show the eventual product. So that has been the biggest shift with AI, meaning that you have to talk about what you're doing early enough to have course correction, to have insight. And yes, there's a downside to it that you lose a bit of the proprietary knowledge. But the upside is everyone is doing everything. A model is coming out literally every day. So even if you are to keep this proprietary knowledge, half of the times in 2 years it will be outdated. So what is the worth of keeping a secret that in 2 years no one has use for it and the market is not willing to pay for it? So it's a good problem that also the market is serving and is also solving by itself.
That's deep. I have two questions. So from a policy perspective, what kind of support do you think maybe the industry needs, seeing as everything is moving so fast?
Yes.
And we're not known to move as fast when it comes to laying the groundwork. So that's one. And two, I think there's an op-ed you did about when USAID pulled out.
Yes.
And we realized, I think other people knew, but a lot of us realized then that we do not own most of our health data. And that's a problem in itself.
Yes.
I think just answer the policy one first.
Yeah.
And then maybe we can talk about that a bit.
Yeah, definitely. I like those questions. Yeah, because I think the biggest asset that we'd have right now, it looks like an oxymoron, but the biggest asset we would have is strong regulation to make AI move faster. Because, the funny thing is, the lack of regulation, sometimes people think, it's the Wild West, we can do everything that we want. But the funny thing is, the lack of regulation actually stifles innovation in health. Why? Because you make something very good. Yes, you don't have regulation, so you're able to make it. But when you now want to take it to Murang'a County or to Bungoma or to Homa Bay, they'll ask you, what has the regulator said? And you've built all these things, but now when it comes now to actually implementing, now you have to start going on and say, I wish I had regulation to tick those boxes and now take it to the market and say, now it's ready for use. So I feel the biggest thing that would be a plus for us is getting innovator-driven regulation. What this means is you get innovators in a room, ask them what are your pain points, not making something that is adversarial, but something that enables and fosters. And number one, the starting point is having a clear view of who is the regulator. Who do I need to go to have this AI innovation? So, for example, in Kenya, you have over 5 regulators. With Nasubo is doing some great work at Qhala on health AI sandboxes. And one of the things that the pillars is regulation. And that's the challenge. Regulation is so heterogeneous, meaning it's so scattered. And that's just Kenya. Imagine you're trying to launch something in East Africa. Now you have to deal with 5 different regulators in 6 different. So it exponentially becomes a regulatory problem. And some of these things are the same checkboxes are the same. Like, have you done this? Have you done this? Are you registered? And that's the point when you're talking about the sandbox and a lot of the Qhala work that is doing in terms of regulation is trying to harmonize a lot of these commonalities so that you can have commonalities harmonized so that if you tick a box at the AU level, you can come that to Kenya and Rwanda and they'll be more of like, it's like a driving license. You have this driving license. Now
you've
passed. So countries can focus on small, centric, like the things which are of interest to them and not the big, they leave the big picture to a harmonized regulatory framework. So that's now the funny thing. I will say regulation. Then, now to your second question on data. Yeah, the issue of USAID. So health is largely funded by 3 sources. It's either out of pocket, it's either insurance, government, but the unseen person who gives a lot of money is the aid money. So that's like the 4th source. And a lot of it is silent, meaning it goes to support systems. And for the longest time, if you're a client, you'll never see these systems because they're back office work.
You just think they work.
Yeah, you think they work. So the op-ed that we did with Kojo is when you said there was a stop work order. That's when you realized, oh, okay, actually, there are all these things which are supported. Yes, it's a local company that's implementing, but when you tie the dots, when you fill in the dots and connect the dots of funding, it's still from the same organization. And the local entity has not been made self-sufficient enough to continue with its own operations. So once the major funder just closes the taps, then the access to this data, because there is no contingency plan, is essentially made like inaccessible. And for me, I have a personal story about it. Because I was doing a study on nutrition, so looking at nutrition in mothers and their babies, and the data that I was using was Kenyan data from the Demographic and Health Survey of 2022. That is Kenyan data done in the 47 counties. And you'd think that's Kenyan data. But right now, when you go to the website, it said, no longer accept new data requests. And I was like, really? And the only way I was able to get it is because one of my supervisors had the data stored somewhere on her computer. So she was like, oh, I just look for it somewhere. And she was like, oh, that's when it hit me. Oh, by the way, like just because something was sponsored, 2022 was a long time. Transition in data, yes, as you do it, probably it will remain in some central place, but 2022 to 2025, definitely some transition plan should have been implemented to move it to the true owners of the data, who are the Kenyans. And the custodians of data, whether it's government or some local partner, that almost looks like a no-brainer. But you see, it wasn't a no-brainer.
It's not a brainer. So do you know if there are any attempts to try and get that data back?
So actually, for the main systems which are used day to day, a lot of them have come back. So USAID came back. And the good thing is at least they prioritized some of these systems. So these systems are back. However, the true problem has not been solved yet, meaning that they have turned on the taps yet, but we've not talked about sustainability. Because yes, the systems are back on. But the question is, yes.
What next?
What next? Like, how do we make sure that this doesn't happen again? What are those mechanisms of transitioning to government or other entities? And government, okay, to not so that I might be against USAID. For the longest time, USAID has been pushing government to take on these responsibilities in its budgets. The discussion has been there for over 10 years. Pushing government, we've made this for you, please take it and run with it. Pay the developers, pay the server costs, but that has not been incorporated in our budgets. So also the other flip side to it is that it's not that this conversation has not been had, but also the blame can be put on both sides. Yeah.
Interesting. So, okay, there's a lot you're doing.
Yeah.
There's a lot you've done.
Yeah.
And I think even just by looking at your energy, there's a lot more solutions to bring to the table.
Yeah.
Is there anything you're currently working on? And also, if you look at the next generation of doctors, things are happening so quickly now. Things are so different.
Yeah.
Maybe just as we wind up, what advice would you give to people coming into the profession now?
Yeah. So what you're working on right now, so from one of our partners, a part of the Health AI Sandbox, is we have our use cases platform. And basically we say, okay, these are the resources that we have at Qhala, the researchers. Do you have an interesting research idea that basically you just need a bit of help to make it AI ready? And one of the things we're now doing is on breast cancer research. So we have datasets on Kenyan breast cancer images. So how does breast cancer appear in Kenyans? So that when now the next time we get a commercial model. So just this morning, somebody sent me a link on a model which is able to give advice, medical advice. And we're thinking now this is a great opportunity to test these models against our data sets. And we're not just talking about breast cancer. We're talking about the whole range of medical data. So currently, that's what we'll be doing. Hopefully, we'll be able to present it at the radiologist conference in September, and that's just the work we're doing. And we have other similar projects in the pipeline. Basically, the whole narrative is taking Kenyan data, testing the models, see whether they work for us, and giving feedback to the model makers to make them better. The advice I'll give to the healthcare providers right now is be curious. Why the resources are there. We have so many free resources from Google, OpenAI. In fact, the challenge will be, what do I need to ignore? Because all these free courses are like, what do I need to ignore? Yeah. Because I think for the older generation, the challenge was getting the information. So they would go to libraries, they would order books from Amazon, they would struggle. Right now, with all these resources, the challenge is now, how do I filter and narrow down to and block out the noise? And I would say the first step is learn skills, because the world is dynamically changing. I know my son, who is 2 years, he might not be a doctor, but if he was to go into a healthcare direction, the way he learn medicine and practice medicine will be fundamentally different from how I'm doing it right now. And how we future-proof ourselves is learning these skills. In the same way that doctors who use computers right now are able to work in the sector. Why? Because you'll find a lot of, for the private facilities, you're using electronic medical records. So in the same way, I think AI will be an enabler. And lastly, is that AI should be an accelerator. So even in how we learn, and even learning about AI, you don't need to struggle and get a book and open it. There are so many these
AI teach you about itself.
Let AI teach you about itself. Like, go to ChatGPT and ask you, what are you? Tell me about you.
Do you have a hat?
Yeah, do you have a hat? Yeah? What is your architecture? Can you answer this question? And I think that's the starting point, because you can't still wait until the point that, I'm going to go and do my master's or a PhD or an undergraduate. In fact, that learning model is fundamentally changing. I have to go and sit in a class and be taught to get a skill that I can have a certificate to demonstrate that skill is something I've learned. So, and how I know that is a different thing is because right now we are talking with a university lecturer, medical school lecturer. They're talking about how cheating is so prevalent. And what that just says is that the learning model is broken, that you can't use the same learning model for healthcare and other things. And that means is that it's becoming easier to, as a doctor, to upskill and get all these resources. And I think, lastly, I'll give a plug for Qhala. So Qhala does a lot of masterclasses, and they are curated for the people who it's designed for. So if it's a policymaker, something that's curated for policymakers, and we have something for healthcare workers. So be on the lookout for that, because I think that would be made by doctors for doctors, and it will help get past that first hump, which people are really afraid of just asking, what is this? How can I use it in my daily practice? And after that, now you can now go to the point of now you're making your own solutions and publishing and just being amazing. Yeah.
You know, when you mentioned that you're doing work with breast cancer, I started thinking of all the ailments that I know people are going through. I know there's a lot of hip replacement surgery happening.
Yes.
There's a lot of fibroids. There's endometriosis. There's so many different issues. So it would be interesting, even just from, let's say, my own perspective, if there's a place for me to get this information, where would it be?
Yes. So, excellent point. Like, we have this wealth of information, and even a lot of even the AI solutions designed for those solutions are also fragmented. I think in the what some people are envisioning is almost like a Play Store type of thing. So where you can get all these resources in one. But I would say, like, especially for resource for health, we have some very good courses on Coursera, edX. But I think one of the things that we're trying to solve at Qhala is this disaggregation of information. And through our use cases, put everything together. Put the healthcare workers, the data sets, the use cases, regulatory, together in one place where people can find them. So I know I haven't given you a straight answer because a lot of it
But you give me hope.
a lot of it is highly fragmented, and we are hoping that Qhala through its sandboxes will help stimulate that whole conversation, so that we start getting visibility on also these other diseases, as you've said, endometriosis, issues of cancer, and even these niche things which like mental health. Sometimes they are not very prevalent, they're not big.
Yeah, addiction is also a really big issue.
Yeah. And some of, there are these big things which get a lot of grant money, like child health, maternal health. But also there are these neglected diseases, which either because of stigma or because people think this one somebody will just self-treat, they haven't really gotten the same level of attention from the development community. So we hope that once you have a platform where we have visibility, and we have not just even not just the healthcare workers, but also the clients, the patient groups, speaking into their needs and what they want models to address for them. When we have all those together, I think we'll have a very rich ecosystem, not just for Kenya, but for Africa. Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I never knew I could talk so long with a doctor.
Yeah.
But I mean, thank you so much for your time. I think that's all we had time for today.
Yeah.
And I know that there will be a lot that's going to come out of this conversation, and also just from the work that you're doing. And I'm actually looking forward to seeing that.
Awesome.
So thank you.
Thank you
very much for
it's
your
a
time.
pleasure.
All right, cheers.